When trust breaks, how do we repair it? That is going to be the topic of this week's edition of Impactful Teamwork. So, welcome everyone. My name's Julia Felton, and I am going to be your host and guide while we delve into the topic of trust. And it felt really applicable to address this topic this week because it's actually fundamental to everything I teach, the importance of trust in organizations. But what we have seen this last week is a lot of instances, particularly in the press, around trust. And so that's what's prompted this edition today. So, what has been happening in the press around trust? Because many of you might be familiar, particularly here in the UK, the BBC's credibility over its reporting of Donald Trump has actually caused a massive scandal here within the BBC. The BBC relied on for being a trustworthy source of news information. We actually live in an era where levels of trust actually around the world are at rock bottom. People really don't trust the media. They don't trust governments. And here we are, the BBC, a powerhouse of typically credibility and integrity, falling into disrepute by the way what's the word I want to say? It joined together two pieces of footage about Donald Trump, which made it look like he was inciting people to fight and take up arms against Congress. And we've also seen, of course, over the summer, the viral Coldplay concert moment where a CEO's private moment turned into a public scandal when it turned out the CEO was having an affair and that was caught on camera. So this is the thing. Trust takes years to build and just seconds to break, and a lifetime to rebuild. And I think that's the quote that feels really true this week, doesn't it? Because we've seen just how fragile that trust can be in leadership and how fast it can vanish. But here's the truth, right? Trust isn't just a media issue or a PR headline. It's actually the invisible glue that holds your business, your team, and your reputation together. And when everything breaks, everything wobbles. And in my book, Unbridled Business, I talk about how trust is this glue that kind of keeps everything together. It's this irony in that it's something that keeps everything together, but it's also a lubricant that keeps everything flowing at the same time. So today in this episode of Impactful Teamwork, I wanted to really explore what happens when trust is lost, why leaders can't outsource the recovery of trust to public relations, and how we rebuild trust from the inside out, using lessons from horse herds and also from some of the material in my Unbridled Teamship Roadmap. So let's just start by talking a little bit about the fragility of trust. Because we live in a world, don't we, where every moment is captured, posted, and dissected. So trust has never been more exposed or more essential. And the BBC example shows us what happens when truth, which is the foundation of our journalistic trust, is compromised. And once that doubt creeps in, credibility evaporates. And this is the same for leaders. People don't just question what you did, they start questioning who you are. And we certainly saw with the Coldplay incident, there we were, two people just out on a night out, having a good time, and how the camera has captured that for posterity's sake. And the repercussions for both of those individuals have been very severe, where I believe they have both had to leave their jobs as a result of that. So within leadership, I think it's important that we acknowledge that trust isn't built on perfection, but it's built on congruence. Our team members want us to be authentic. They want us to know that if we do make mistakes, that we can own up to them and move forward. And what we see in the horse herds is the lead mare She doesn't demand obedience. She earns it through consistent energy, presence, and clarity. And actually, the moment her energy wavers, the herd sense it. And in humans, it's no different. When clients come to my unbridled leadership workshops, one of the things that we really focus on is how do you build trust with the horses? You build trust through 4 things. And the first is paying unwavering attention to the situation around you. So you're really present and grounded in the moment. The second way is that you have real clarity on where you're going and what you want to do. The third way is that you have the right energy to match the situation, enough energy to get things going. And the fourth way is through this congruence and authenticity. And if you don't have those 4 dynamics in place, the horse won't trust you and won't go with you, but neither will your team. So the thing is, we can't fake this coherence, this authenticity. People feel the mismatch between what we say and what we mean, just in the same way that the horses do. So what happens when trust breaks? When trust cracks, performance does too. Where we see this in the way that teams withdraw, communication becomes filtered, people don't say what they mean, creativity dies, and it's replaced by caution, and team engagement drops. And in the Unbridled Teamship Roadmap, we look at what happens when this trust starts collapsing. We talk about game-changing trust. Trust changes the game in business, and it can result in you being in the turbocharged level of your business when everything is going as planned, everything is in flow. But when it starts collapsing, teams drop into silos, and we end up in a toxic team culture, and things become very turbulent. We move from seamless unity to siloed survival. And what happens when we get into this place is people protect themselves rather than get aligned behind the mission. They follow the rules, they comply, but they no longer contribute to what is going on. And if this erosion of trust exists within the organization, it spills into customer relationships, partner networks, and even into the public domain, as we've seen. And that's what the BBC is facing right now. A slow rebuild, not of information, but of integrity. So let's be blunt. You can't rebuild trust you haven't owned breaking. So what do I mean by that? By saying, I'm sorry if everyone was offended, it just doesn't cut it. True accountability sounds like I made a mistake, it caused harm, I own it, and here's what I'm doing to make it right. And obviously, in the case of the BBC, we saw the head of the BBC, Tim Davis, step down. But also what I was very impressed about was we saw the head of news. The lady, she actually stepped down. She said she was accountable. She took accountability because she was in charge of the whole news operation and felt that was the right thing to do. And for me, that really showed true courage. It really showed her vulnerability in action because she took accountability for what was going on within her team. And actually, I have massive respect for her for doing that. And this vulnerability isn't weakness, but for me was that birthplace of credibility where I was like, wow, you've really stepped up and taken responsibility and accountability. And unfortunately, this is something that we see missing a lot in organizations. People taking true accountability for what we're doing. People are always quick to pass the buck to somebody else and say they weren't accountable for it. And of course, when we get into that lack of accountability, then we're on a very rocky road. Lack of accountability is part of the 5 dysfunctions of a team that Patrick Lencioni talks about. And when we don't have accountability, we just can't get high performance because nothing works together. So in herd dynamics, when a leader misjudges a threat and causes panic, they calm the herd, not through denial, but through grounded energy, slowing their breath, softening their body, signaling safety signals. So that's leadership repair in its rawest form, when a leader starts really taking accountability, they step up, they're really grounded and they're present and they acknowledge what has happened. So how do we assess the damage? Because after an apology, we really need to audit what happens. We need to look at who's been affected. Maybe it's the team, maybe it's the board, maybe it's the clients, maybe it's the public. Where's the trust been dented? Is it in terms of relations or competence or structure? And importantly, what fears or stories are now circulating that you need to address? Because when there is a breach of trust, we often move from coherence into this chaos. People don't know what's happening. It causes a large amount of uncertainty. And for leaders, we need to rebuild this trust by understanding what happened and then taking the right creative actions to resolve the situation. So we can't repair what we don't know happened and we don't understand why it happened. And then once we start rebuilding trust, it takes time and energy. So one of the things that we saw that happen with the BBC was actually when this was first discovered and really recognized that the poor editing of this video and the way it had changed the complete message of what was being said by Mr. Trump. What we saw the BBC do was they dropped into silence. And silence kills faster than mistakes. And the BBC's delay in responding only widened the gap. So it's really important in leadership, if we break trust, that we're very transparent about it, because transparency is the antidote to speculation. We need to create a visible recovery plan. We need to communicate the next steps openly, set clear expectations, and invite feedback, and then deliver on everything that we have promised. Because in moments of uncertainty, consistency becomes the new currency of trust. It's what people can rely on. People can rely on us to communicate effectively and tell them what is going to happen. What we need to do is we need to demonstrate change when we break trust. We don't just promise that we're going to change it. We actually need to demonstrate change by our actions. And this is where most leaders fail. They think saying sorry ends the story. But trust isn't rebuilt through words, it's rebuilt through patterns and action. And when I'm working with clients and my horses, I often say to them, the horses don't listen to your words, but they listen to your energy. If you say you're calm, but your energy is chaotic, they walk away. So when we're giving an apology related to something we've broken trust in, we need to be really heartfelt in what we're saying. People need to feel the integrity of what we're saying through our actions and words. So what are some practical examples of this? Maybe we need to invite our team to hold us to account. We want to report back on progress transparently. And we might need to seek coaching or external input to demonstrate commitment to growth. Because trust is just rebuilt one micro or action at a time. So we rebuild trust through over communication. I always talk about we can never communicate enough in business. Communicate and communicate again. And when we're over communicating, it needs to be done authentically. Not just noise, but with real clarity. We need to let people know where things stand, where things changing, and what remains stable. So this means regular updates, regular office hours, honest reflection emails. All of these signal transparency. And I think this is really important, that sometimes we can't talk, maybe for legal reasons or ethical reasons. And it's really important that as leaders, we tell people that. Maybe there's something that happens in the lead up to a potential takeover of a company, and we're bound by SEC regulations. We can't say anything. Then we need to tell people that our hands are tied and we can't make a comment on something. It's better to do that than say nothing at all, because silence breeds fear, whereas honesty breeds safety for people. And I know when I was leading my team through that transition during the Enron crisis, there were times where I didn't know what was happening. I wasn't high enough up the food chain to know the answers, but I had to be really honest and transparent with my team about, I don't know what is happening, but as soon as I do, I will let you know. And that candid communication actually paid me really well. And it's frustrating when you're a leader and you can't communicate what is going to be happening for this whatever reason when we are prevented from doing that. And really, honesty is the best policy, telling people you don't know. In the case of that Enron situation, I really didn't know what was going to be happening with my team. I had to be candid with them. I had to tell them that I don't know. Our roles all might be made redundant. We all might lose our jobs. I just don't know. But actually doing that enabled my team members to feel empowered. They felt empowered that they could make choices about their career, about what they wanted to do. And did that mean I lost some of the people from my team? Absolutely. Some people decided to bail ship. But others appreciated the candor and stayed with the process through. And actually, there were only a couple of people that ended up leaving during that situation. One thing I do know to be true about trust is, like everything, trust is a living system. It grows through energy alignment and it dies through misalignment. And it renews through courageous honesty. So when we're talking about building trust, I often like to think about it a little bit like putting coins in a money box. Every time you put a coin in a money box, it builds the amount of trust we've got. But if all of a sudden we break that trust, it's just like we shatter that money box and everything falls over the floor and we have to start again. So whether you're leading a herd, a team, or a company, the principle is the same. Trust is not given, it's earned moment by moment. And when you lose it, it's your next move that defines your legacy. So next time you face a trust rupture in your business, don't reach out for spin, reach for truth. Because in a world obsessed with image, integrity is a real power move. So if this conversation resonated with you and you'd like to go deeper into the Unbridled Teamship Roadmap, where I explore how to build game-changing trust, impactful contribution, and unbridled adaptability that keeps your team in flow even when things get messy, I'd really encourage you to head over to businesshorsepower.com/quiz, take the Turbocharge Your Team quiz, and as a result of that, you'll be invited to a Turbocharge Your Team audit. This is when we can look at how trust is shaping up in your team and how we can help make it a superpower to accelerate the growth of your business to the next level. So I really hope you've enjoyed this really timely edition of Looking at Trust. It's something I've been meaning to talk about for a while because it just underpins everything that we do in business. And just the events of the last week just triggered me to get on with recording this episode for you. So until next week, I'd really like you to think about, what are the levels of trust in your business? What do you need to rebuild, or who do you need to rebuild trust with? And how can you do that? Because the higher levels of trust that we have in our business, the more efficient and effective our business can be, and the bigger impact we can make in the world. The more we're trusted by other people, the more collectively we can join together and make a massive impact in the world. So until next week, have an amazing time. Bye-bye.